Welcome to another episode of Joy Meets World. I'm your host, Joy Yuki, and this podcast is talking about my trip around the United States to see the national parks with my dog Quincy. And today I'm going to tell you about my travels and my trip to Zion National Park, plus two bonus parks that I got to visit as well. So tuck in, buckle your seatbelt. This is going to be a little bit longer episode than normal, but I promise you it will be worth it. So when I left off, I was in Yellowstone in kind of South Montana, North Wyoming area. A little city called Martin City, and I left there and traveled first to Idaho Falls, then to Salt Lake City, then to Cedar City in southwest Utah, which is near Zion National Park. So it would have been a crazy long trip if I had gone straight from Yellowstone to Zion National Park. Way too long of a drive. Can't do it. So I broke it up into shorter stints and got to visit Idaho Falls and Salt Lake City as well. So I went from first stint was Yellowstone to Idaho Falls. So that was about a 430-mile trip. It took about 6 hours, and it was a little longer than it normally would have been because, of course, all of the roads in Yellowstone were closed. There was no other way out or in besides the one road that went into Yellowstone from the north entrance to Martin City. And so I took that one out. And then you have to drive north to Bozeman, Montana, and then south back down into Idaho and Idaho Falls. So that's why it took 6 hours and was so many miles. Also, it probably took me like 6.5 to 7 hours because on the way out of Yellowstone, I got stopped 3 times by the bison, and they were just not having it that day. They just wanted the road to themselves. I didn't mind at all. I was the only car out on the road. It was early in the morning, so it was really cool to get to see them. Definitely go watch my story from Yellowstone, and you'll get to see what I saw. They crossed the Yellowstone River on the bridge that goes there right in front of me, and there was a calf that was at the back of the line just trying to hurry up, which was really cute. So I enjoyed that. Didn't get to stay long in Idaho Falls, just basically overnight. So not much to say about that city. It looked cool from what I could see. Looked really nice. Stayed in a very nice kind of apartment duplex. So easy in, easy out. The next day, we drove to Salt Lake City, and that was 214 miles in about 3 hours, so not too bad. We stayed in an apartment downtown. It was like a renovated old brick building, but really, really nice units. Tiny. It's basically a studio apartment, right? A bed, kitchen area, bathroom. So it was really perfect for what we needed, and it was cool. It had really cool views around Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is amazing to me. I mean, all of these cities that I visited are, but just these northern cities, because there's just these giant mountains everywhere, and I'm not used to that, and it's so hard to process. But it's so cool. You just look out the window, or you just look up from, sitting at a restaurant or putting gas in your car, and there's like just this giant mountain, and it's so beautiful, this snow-covered mountain. So it was warm when I got to Salt Lake City. The weekend was warm, like I would say sunny and in the 70s. The apartment was right near Temple Square and the Capitol. So in that part of Salt Lake City, very walkable. So I did get to walk, and a lot of people were out enjoying the day, just sitting on the lawn in the Capitol and walking around. Temple Square was actually under construction. A lot of it is under construction, so covered in scaffolding, covered in that construction fencing. So there wasn't a ton to see or walk around in, but I did walk around the square. Quincy and I walked around the square and saw what we could see, and it was massive. It was incredibly massive and just insane to see that and just know that that's in that city. It's an important part of that city. I also got to walk to a part of town called Trolley Square, which is a renovated, it used to be the trolley works essentially when that was the mode of transportation where they would get them ready to go out and fix them and repair them and store them, that kind of thing. And they've turned it into, I guess you would say, like a shopping center if you're familiar with Atlanta, like a Ponce City Market. But it's a smaller building, definitely than Ponce City Market, but the same type of concept, what they did with it. And there's a brewery in there called Desert's Edge Brewery that I walked to, had a beer, had a breakfast chimichanga. That was really good. Obviously, you can tell because I remember it. But that was really nice. But so I stayed there a Saturday, a Sunday, Monday, and then left on a Tuesday. By the Monday it was getting colder, not too bad though, maybe in the 50s. And then Tuesday I woke up and it was snowing hard. So I got out of town. Don't want to deal with snow if I don't have to deal with snow. And drove south to South Utah, and it was about an hour and a half before the snow really stopped coming down, and got back into that blue sky of the Southwest, and sunshine. And that day ended up being in I'm going to say the high 60s in southern Utah when I got down here to Cedar City. That drive was about 250 miles and 3.5 hours, so not that bad. Cedar City is a great location. It's an hour away from Zion National Park, so really not a big deal to get to the park. It was a good distance. Zion was founded in 1919. It's so funny to say this, but it's one of the smaller parks. They say that it's one of the smaller national parks, and it definitely is one of the smaller parks. Like, I think you could, like hardcore, if you're really in good shape, you could do all the hikes in a day. Definitely 2 to 3 days, you would knock out the entire park. Just because I did a couple of hikes, and I'm not in the best shape at all. And I did the hikes in half the time that was posted. So I think if you're in good shape and, you don't have anything else to do, you can dedicate all your time to Zion, you could really get it done. Just compared to all the other national parks that I've been to, it is smaller. All the other national parks are, they have like almost like zones, like the north zone, the south zone, the east, the west side. Their Yellowstone is basically all of Wyoming. All that north section. Olympic was the entire peninsula of Washington. They're massive parks, and Zion is probably a quarter of the size of those bigger parks. So still huge. It's still massive and tons to do, but definitely more manageable, I think, than the other parks. And it has a lot going on too, really cool hikes. The other cool thing about Zion is it has a trolley or a bus system. So you can just park your car in the visitor center, which has a massive parking lot, and then jump on the bus to go to any hike you want in the park. And then when you're done the hike, you just come back and take the bus, wherever you want to go, to the next stop, or back to the visitor center, or wherever you want to go. Now, to put an asterisk in that, the trolley starts running at 7. The visitor center opens at 8. And I think you can, still drive into the park and use the road as well, as the trolleys do. But the parking gets limited, right, the farther up you get. So it's almost more advisable to just park at the visitor center and ride the trolley. But like, that parking fills up super fast. So I got there at 8 o'clock, a little before 8 o'clock. There was a giant line at the ticketing booth. When I actually drove into the parking lot for the visitor center, they had signs up that said the parking lot was full. But it was not full. There was plenty of parking still left, but not a ton. Like, it filled up really, really quick. And so I would say when you go to Zion, get there as early as possible. So you get a parking spot in that visitor center. Just start your hikes early. I mean, you're going to beat the crowds on the trails too, which is always really nice. They're not, it's hiking, it's a trail, so it's not the widest trails, in the world. And so just to have that ability to do your own thing and not be around the crowds is really good. So that's what I would say. It was also like the perfect hiking weather in April. It was sunny. It was a little bit windy, and it was in the upper 50s, which is perfect when you're hiking these mountain trails, right? You're getting super hot and sweaty. It's a lot of work. And so you don't want it to be, like scorching hot. Like I would not go in the summer. I've heard that it's very, very hot because when that sun hits the canyon walls, it just radiates heat. And so I really enjoyed my day at Zion National Park. The hikes that I did were the Emerald Pools hike. So there's 3 Emerald Pools. So there's the lower, middle, and upper pools. And I would say it gets pretty strenuous the last from the middle pool to the upper pool, just because it's like a lot of kind of built rocky stairways and a lot steeper, but it is only 0.3 miles from middle to top. So, if you can stop and rest or if you can just hike through, it's definitely worth it. The whole hike itself, I think, is a little over 1.5 miles, and it's a loop that you can do, which is great because you see stuff that's different on the way back down. I will say it definitely felt like double that. It felt like a 3-mile hike. It did not feel like a mile and a half. So just prepare yourself for that. But definitely really cool to see, the waterfall coming down and forming these 3 separate pools. Along the canyon. The other hike I did was just a short 1/2 mile hike. It's called the Grotto Hike. It was between tram stops, and it was just on the side of the canyon. And then the third one I did was called the Watchman Trail, which is a windy trail along the side of a canyon. It's about 3.5 miles, and it's a there and back trail. So you go up to the point and come back down. And the end point is this magnificent view of a mountain peak called the Watchman, which is why it's called the Watchman Trail. It was a good hike. Highly recommend that one. The 2 best known hikes at Zion are Angel's Landing, which is one of also the most dangerous hikes in the national park system. But you need to get a permit to hike it just because it's getting so crowded now that it becomes dangerous and there are too many people on it. And so they have to limit the amount of people that go on it per day. And they had just put that permit system into effect when I started my trip, and I did not know that. And so I did not get a permit. You can apply for day before permits, I guess, just in case some people cancel their reservations and there are spots open. So I was doing that, but I didn't get one of those either. So I didn't get to hike Angel's Landing. And then the other well-known hike is the Narrows, which is sort of, it's a river, and you actually hike up the river, and then the canyon walls kind of, the Narrows, it gets narrow. And so it's a really well-known hike in Zion, but unfortunately the time of year in the spring that I was there, that's when the snow melt comes into play, and the river water can get really high from day to day. And so they can't let you hike because it's dangerous to hike. You actually are hiking through the water, and so if it gets too high, they can't let you in to do that. And I really thought I was going to be able to do it because I had heard from some other hikers that the day before I went, the couple of days before I went, they were letting people hike. And so I had hoped and was pretty confident that I would be able to hike the Narrows, but unfortunately too much snow melt and I could not get in. So that was a bummer on both counts, but just means I'll have to go back and do it again, and do Zion as a whole. It's okay. It's fine. It was still some really good hikes, and I really enjoyed my time. The other national park that I got to do besides Zion was Bryce Canyon National Park. So that park was started in 1924, and there's actually a road in Zion. It's a tunnel that connects Zion to Bryce Canyon to the north, and then to the Grand Canyon to the south, which is wild. So they're all interconnected. So you could really do all three parks at a time if you wanted to. So the other park that I did was Bryce Canyon. I didn't take the tunnel. I drove from Cedar City to Bryce Canyon on a separate day. That was about an hour and a half drive, and I actually opted to do a horseback riding tour of Bryce Canyon. And Bryce Canyon is known for these sort of pinnacle-like structures that are called hoodoos. They're actually in a lot of the national parks, especially like in the Southwest or like the desert areas. They kind of resemble like big red piles of rocks, but like thin, narrow piles of rocks. So there's a lot of those there. So got on actually a mule at 9:30 a.m. one morning with about 10 to 13 other people. On a mix of horses and mules, and we had a guide, and they led us about a three miles up and down the canyon on just a tour of Bryce Canyon. It was a really neat way to see a national park, definitely to see a canyon, which can be really, I think canyons can be really tiring and exhausting to hike, and so I think you can't do as much of them in as much time, just because you're going so far down and then so far up, and it's such extremes. It's really exhausting. So it was nice to have a mule do all the work for me. I was definitely sore afterwards, but it was worth it. It was a lot of fun, and it was so different. I think what struck me about Bryce Canyon is that the rocks are so red, and they're red because of the iron content, right? And in the soil and in the rock. But the sky was so blue. And I know, the Southwest sky is that just that certain depth of blue. But this was even a different color than that. Like, it was so much more saturated. It's the most saturated blue sky I've ever seen. No clouds. I even took off my sunglasses because, sometimes if you're wearing your sunglasses, colors look a little bit more saturated than without them. And I thought that's what was happening, but no, it was actually that blue of a sky, like that deep of a blue, which was wild and probably my favorite thing. I would definitely say for Zion and for Bryce Canyon, if you want to go and visit those parks, go in April. Actually, I think it's a really good time to go, April or May, just because the weather is just starting to warm up. So it's definitely doable. It's not freezing cold. Roads aren't closed by snow and ice. Hikes aren't closed by snow and ice. Things are open. It's cool, but not too cold. The crowds aren't as bad, right? You're not going to struggle with like parking as much, or, reservations running out, or that kind of thing. So that's what I would suggest. I mean, even with that though, Zion was packed. I can't imagine how it gets in the late spring and summer, because by the time I left, I think at 1 p.m., it was insanely packed. Like, there was huge lines for the trolleys. People were driving around the parking lot. Like, people stopped me when I was walking in my car and asked me if I was leaving so they could, take my spot. Like, desperate measures. Bryce Canyon, same thing. By the time I left at 11 o'clock, like, the visitor center was insane. Like, insane. To wait in line to, like, buy a postcard was, like, 15, 20 minutes. So the earlier in the day you can get there, the better. Going on weekdays is always better. Going there earlier in the season is better. You're going to have less crowds. But even so, you can't guarantee anything. Like, all the permits for Angel's Landing were gone. And it's the earliest in the season. So definitely do some planning. Definitely go early in the season would be my suggestion. The last park that I got to go to in this area is called Great Basin National Park, and I honestly hadn't heard of it until I planned this trip. It was founded in 1986, so a little bit of a newer park. It's a little farther from Cedar City in Utah. It was about 2.5 hours to drive, and it's actually located in Nevada. So like I want to say 5 miles over the border of Utah into Nevada. So really, really close to being in Utah. It's actually in the Pacific time zone, whereas Utah is in Mountain time zone. So you change time zones for a second. It's like it's in the desert. It's in I think it's called the Snake Desert or the Snake Valley Desert, but it is you're just driving in desert for about an hour and a half to get there, and then there's nothing around it. It's just really in the middle of nowhere. A lot like how Death Valley was, actually. Kind of similar vibes driving there. I actually had to stop on the road because there were cows in the road, and there was so many calves, like 5 different baby calves, who were basically the ones on the road. They didn't really know what to do with a car in the road, but thankfully didn't get into any trouble there and got around them and got to the park. The park is really known for a couple of things. So Wheeler Peak, which is a mountain peak. If you go to my story, or my reel, it's in the background of the sign for Great Basin National Park, and there's a scenic drive that you can take to kind of get to Wheeler Peak and get some good photos of it. There's also caves there, Lehman Caves, which I didn't get to see because they also need a reservation system, and they only take about like 7 people. I want to say like 21 people total per day. There's like 3 tours per day and like 7 to 10 people on each tour. And so those reservations go quickly, and there's like no extra ones. I'm not hyper bummed about that because I'm not a huge cave person. I would have gone and seen it. I think it would have been cool to see, but I'm not like majorly disappointed. Caves are not my favorite thing in the world. I get a little claustrophobic. But that is there. It's surrounded by the South Snake Mountains, and I got to hike about 2 miles. A really cool trail in the Snake Mountains. It crossed a lot of streams, just through kind of woods and open fields, and then I did a there and back hike on that one. It is a loop, but at one point it was just a field of snow. Like you couldn't see where the trail was. It wasn't, shoveled or plowed. It hadn't melted yet. So I turned back and went back the way I came, but it was still really beautiful to see all the streams. This whole Great Basin and Bryce and Zion are covered in what's called bristlecone pine, which is really, I don't know if you would be able to tell that it's a pine tree. I don't think I would at first glance. I mean, it definitely has pine cones, but it's so scraggly and short and thin that you wouldn't immediately be like, yes, that's a pine tree. And it's that way because it's, growing in the desert, doesn't have much to work with. But it actually, bristlecone pines are some of the oldest trees in the world. Even though they're so little and so thin, apparently their age gets measured a different way. So traditionally trees, right, get measured. Every ring that they have on them is like a year. So like the really thick trees have like 100 rings, they're 100 years old, so on and so forth. Well, bristlecone pines, each ring is actually 100 years old. So ones that are like, like the size of my waist, right? They're like the oldest trees. So they don't look very big at all. But they're actually like 1,200 years old, So it's very interesting to learn that fact about the bristlecone pine. Great Basin National Park, again, in the middle of nowhere. When I looked at Google, it said was telling me it's busier than normal. And I've had bad experiences with that. And So I headed there pretty early. And I guess it was busier than normal. I mean, there was maybe 8 cars in the parking lot. Um, Barely saw anyone. But maybe that must be busier than normal for them. But there was plenty of room for me. I just thought that was really funny. So that is my trifecta of parks: Zion, Bryce, Great Basin. Had a great time. I think my favorite from all of them is actually Bryce. I know Zion gets the most attention and is usually the one people favor the most, but I think mine was Bryce just because the rocks were just so red and that sky was so blue, and I got to ride a mule. I mean, who doesn't love that? So next up, I am off to Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park, which is in southwestern Utah. So staying in the same state, just heading west. And those parks are right next to each other, so I'll get to explore them at the same time. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to telling you about that. Until then, you can always rate and subscribe. Leave a review on this podcast, or you can follow me on Instagram at JoyYugi, or on YouTube by the same name. Whatever suits your fancy, I would love that. Let me know if you have questions, or if you've ever been to Zion or Bryce or Great Basin, what you think of them or what your favorite part was. I'm always interested to see, what other people think of them, if they visited or if they want to visit. So let me know. Until next time, I wish you happy travels wherever life is taking you.